By defining our goals more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly towards it. These words are not mine, but John F. Kennedy's, when he explained why he set out to put a man on the moon. Defining clear goals is the single most important task of leadership. They give us shared direction, a vision to rally around, to mobilize public action. Goals inspire us to be innovative and accelerate the development of new ideas and technologies. While Kennedy defined his goal on the backdrop of the Cold War, we must define our goals and visions in the context of the challenges that we face today. First of all, there's no doubt that the climate crisis is the greatest challenge of our generation. And with the words of another great president, Barack Obama, we are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. Secondly, the current global pandemic is leading to economic crisis and recession. It's revealing and exacerbating the vast inequalities within and between countries, which threaten to further disconnect our world and polarize our societies. And polarization, in my view, represents a third point in terms of the challenges that we face. A serious political legitimacy crisis, where up to half of the world's population do not trust their political leaders to be able to deliver the solutions to their hardships. There is a disconnect between people and their political leaders, a distrust in our democratic institutions. So those were the challenges. The good news is that we already have defined our common goals. We have a vision and we have a roadmap. The vision has been coined simply and beautifully in the UN Biodiversity Strategy for 2050. A world of living in harmony with nature. This is, in a nutshell, what sustainability is about. Humans living in balance with one another and with our surroundings. This is our Man on the Moon project. And a roadmap to get us closer to that vision within the next decade towards 2030 was almost miraculously adopted unanimously in September 2015 by all UN member states. The 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The most ambitious global development agenda the world has ever seen. And it was followed by the Paris Agreement later that same year, setting out the level of ambition needed for the most urgent of the 17 SDGs, SDG 13 on climate action. With the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement, we have a strong political framework to hold our governments accountable for what they have agreed to achieve. When I have dedicated my time to the 2030 Agenda, it is because for the first time in UN history, we have a plan that addresses all three dimensions of sustainability at the same time: the economic, the social, and the environmental. And for the first time, it takes a universal approach. This is based on the critical acknowledgement that we cannot achieve one goal without addressing the others. They're interdependent and closely interlinked. If we want to end poverty and hunger, this cannot be achieved without addressing climate change and climate justice. Or if we want to give all children quality education, we need to ensure gender equality, clean water and sanitation, renewable energy, infrastructure. If you look at the 169 targets for the 17 SDGs, you will find that these interlinkages exist across all the goals. And you will see why these goals require a transformation, not only in developing countries, but in all regions and countries. Whereas developing countries face the main challenges in SDG 1 to 6, sort of the classic development goals of improving human well-being, poverty, hunger, health, education, gender equality, and water. The developed countries face the main challenges with the green SDGs, with their heavily resource-intensive production and consumption patterns. Industrialized countries have an urgent task of decoupling their environmental and climate footprint from economic growth, while also supporting developing countries in meeting basic well-being targets. So the job is well defined. And then how is it going? Well, even before COVID, the world was far off target. While many politicians, business leaders, and civic leaders have adopted the SDGs as a common language on sustainability, the will to adopt concrete measures to put us on track to reach the SDGs has been lacking. And with the pandemic, we have already seen setbacks on all of the SDGs. 150 million children have been pushed back into poverty, and many more are out of school. Jobs are lost, inequalities rise. Investments and political action on climate change has been stalled. And some leaders, no need to mention them, are turning against international cooperation and solidarity, pulling out of international agreements. This has led to a discussion of a make or break moment for the 2030 agenda. Some are arguing that we should abandon or at least adjust the SDGs to make them more realistic. Okay, time to bring back JFK. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do other things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. Okay. So we set ambitious goals, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. We do it to push ourselves, to push each other to stay focused. So we shouldn't let a crisis divert us from that goal. We should use it to become even more determined. Now more than ever, we need a common goal and a roadmap that can lead us in the right direction. And we know it's doable. The IMF and others assess that it would take about 2% of global GDP to finance the SDGs, with around 0.4% in development aid to fill the gaps in lower income countries. So what will it take? Well, in my view, at least 3 things. 1, political will. 2, mass mobilization. And 3, innovation. To the first point, political will. Well, you can say that the first step to a cure is to acknowledge that you are ill. And unfortunately, there is still a need for awareness raising among politicians about the urgency of the sustainability crisis. And regarding the SDGs, way too often the implementation of this agenda is a government-led exercise, detached from the legislative bodies and from the democratic and civic space. On a global level, only 14% of parliaments are actively engaged in SDG implementation, according to the Interparliamentary Union. There's a widespread lack of capacity, knowledge, and tools to ensure a holistic and systematic approach to create transformative change. We need parliaments that are fit for purpose to deliver on the 2030 agenda. Through concrete legislation, budget allocation, monitoring and oversight, and to ensure the civic space and protect human rights. This crisis represents an opportunity for parliamentarians to reconnect with the people, to demonstrate that they're capable to react to the people's needs through action and delivery, leaving no one behind. This calls for a revitalization of parliaments as the link between the global and the local, between institutions and the people, to address the legitimacy crisis, the health crisis, and the sustainability crisis. That is why I have launched my Do Tank 2030 Beyond, to work with parliamentarians and people to reconnect and accelerate action on the SDGs together. We recently launched the initiative Parliamentarians for the Global Goals at the UN General Assembly. It is a global network of parliamentarians from local, national, and regional parliaments who are engaged in the 2030 agenda. And the purpose is to provide them a forum for exchange of ideas and best practices, and to support parliamentarians around the world in establishing cross-party collaboration to embed the SDGs in their parliamentary work. We will provide them with access to tools and expertise to help them be the SDG pioneers in their parliaments, to drive initiatives around SDG budgeting and screening of legislation, monitoring, and engaging with their communities. By connecting them, we'll make sure that they can inspire and encourage each other, and to know that they are not alone in their quest. And this leads me to the second element that is needed to deliver on the SDGs, mass mobilization. And this is where you guys come in. Many of you who are listening today are students, part of a youth generation that have shown the world that you have a voice, you have a strong voice when you stand together, as we've seen it with Fridays for Future and the other climate movements among the youth. Young people all over the world have raised their voices to demand action from their leaders. In my country, Denmark, this led to the first ever climate election in 2019, which elected a new government on a strong green mandate. So you have a role to play. Join a movement or create a movement and engage with your politicians, not just to shout at them, but to encourage them and those among them who are fighting for your cause. Let them know that you will support them and what you expect of them. And on the third point, innovation. You as university students can play a very active role too. While I'm no believer in the tech fix theory that we can just sit around and wait for technology to save us, there's no doubt that we need new and innovative solutions to deliver on the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. You can engage in this endeavor through your universities by putting your skills and enthusiasm into tackling some of the challenges posed by the SDGs. Use it as a framework, a guideline to direct your curiosity towards the meaningful and unsolved issues. We need your fresh ideas and creative approach because, as Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. None of us can do this alone, but we can all do something. And with the common vision of a world where we live in harmony with nature and with the SDGs as our roadmap, let's get to work. Thank you.